Good evening, everybody. Hi, I'm Bobby Steele. I'm the director of the Multicultural Center. Welcome to the 2022 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemoration Speaker. We are honored to host Brandon Pope to hear his talk about the legacy and spirit of Dr. King. In light of the current social climate nationally and locally on college campuses, the significance of this conversation is overwhelming. Although much progress has been made, there is still much more waiting to be accomplished. Dr. King stated, "Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. Therefore, it's necessary that we still celebrate and honor the contributions of our American hero, Dr. Martin Luther King." Please join me in welcoming to the stage Sharon Birdsong to introduce our speaker.
Sorry, I'm going to take this off real quick. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sharon Birdsong. I am a junior here at Ball State, majoring in political science, and I am a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Today, I'm going to be introducing the great Brandon Pope, who is an award-winning and Emmy-nominated television host, media critic, and columnist with work featured at CW26 Chicago, WGN Radio, Ebony Magazine, Medium, and the Chicago Sun-Times. Brandon is the president of the Chicago chapter of National Association of Black Journalists, where he focuses on shepherding in the next generation of journalists. Brandon's mentorship experience also includes serving as a board member for the Obama's Foundation My Brother's Keeper initiative, dedicated to closing the opportunity gaps for kids of color in the greater Chicago area. His work has taken him all around the country and beyond the states, covering the 2012 and 2016 presidential elections, the 2012 Summer Olympics, the Indy 500, college football, PGA Tour, as well as NFL and NBA playoffs. Outside of his career, Brandon also appears on podcasts and radio programs to discuss topics ranging from current events of The Bachelor. Brandon is a proud 2014 Ball State graduate and serves on the Journalism Alumni Board. Please give me a warm hand and help me welcome Brandon Pope.
Good job. Ooh, all right. Ball State. Baller State, as I call it. What a joy it is to be here with you all. I'm filled with gratitude at this enormous honor and responsibility to be your MLK speaker this year. It really is great to be at this school that I always say shaped me. And the journey to get here was something for the books. This kid from Ohio with some Indiana living knew exactly where he wanted to go to school right after the first visit. Had a great tour of the TCOM facilities. Now it's media facilities. I hear you, Dean Page Turner over there. Susie Smith gave an outstanding tour. I saw all the programs, the Emmys, the green screens. There's this really awesome Chinese place on Bethel called Red Sun. It's not there anymore. That honestly was one of the big selling points. And I saw, when touring through these programs and all these great facilities, what I could become. Not just as a student, but as a person and as a journalist. And I knew that Ball State was the key to becoming everything I wanted to be. I definitely applied to other schools, because you have to for security. But Ball State was always the target, the goal, the dream. But I was terrible at math in high school. I thought that 3 + 1 was 31. So I got put on the dreaded wait list. Oh, Ball State, how could you do this to me? I waited. All the other schools I applied to were like, yeah, come on through, bruh. Math, who cares? I felt like Will Smith in that Fresh Prince of Bel-Air episode where his dad comes to the picture and then just up and leaves. How come he don't want me, man? How come Ball State don't want me, man? I was devastated. My high school football coach at the time and college counselor Richard Bryant. He's a Ball State grad. He called the school, principal called the school, counselors called the school, teachers, staff, community leaders wrote a bunch of letters. Basically, they bugged Ball State people enough times. And eventually, on the final day, decision day, where my mom's like, listen, you got to make a decision, okay? It's either going to these schools here. If you don't hear from Ball State, it is what it is. Finally, that letter came in saying I was accepted to the university, and it was the best day, really, of my life. Now, I am very much used to the TV world. This is going to be the longest I've ever spoken in one sitting without tossing to a commercial break or being told to rap. I was talking to your president. He told me that David Letterman, when he was on campus recently, he would pause for a commercial break. And he said, hey, if you need to pause for a commercial break, feel free. So I have secured some corporate sponsors for this evening. This MLK speech brought to you by Olive Garden. When you're here, your family. Also brought to you by Chili's Baby Back Ribs. We did consider soliciting the sponsorship of Corona and Corona Light, but I thought it was too soon. I want to talk about the namesake for why I'm here. The incredible man, the incredible person, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If my clicker gets to working, we'll work on that. More than 50 years ago, in 1968, a shot was fired that was heard around the world. Martin Luther King Jr. was taken from us by someone who thought the dream would die with the man. Well, they were clearly wrong. That dream did not die. It is still alive today. But Dr. King's legacy goes deeper than just one speech, one moment, or one dream. He presented a roadmap for us to progress and equality for all. But to really dig deep into what this dream meant back then and what it means for our lives today, we got to wind the clocks back a little bit. The mid-20th century, slavery was over. But was it really? That's a question many at the time were asking, because they were still dealing with so many issues. Jim Crow laws in particular, institutionalized racism permeated through every system, every function of life imaginable, housing, employment, education, entertainment even. Every day, black Americans were treated as an inconvenience, a burden, something that needs to be dealt with on the side, or worse, something that needs to be eliminated, a threat. They suffered beatings, even all-out murder, and they were unable to fully exercise their right to vote. Now, some of that sounds a lot like what's going on today. Let's think about it. Housing. Policies and laws are still actively leading to segregation. The DOJ is currently dealing with cases in Oklahoma, New York, Illinois, Ohio, Minnesota, Michigan, South Carolina, Florida, and the list goes on. Or how about employment? Employment discrimination, it is very much illegal, but still very prevalent today. According to Vox, thousands of people report discrimination to the government every year, and employers are rarely held accountable. In fact, every year, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission closes more than 100,000 cases. Guess how many actually get solved or resolved? Only 18% have resulted in monetary justice, a change in workplace conditions, or a change in staff or leadership. Education, we're still having issues with that, still separate, still unequal. In Chicago, schools on the north side get new laptops and technology. Schools on the south and west side get closed, shut down for good. What does that do? Well, it forces parents on the south and west side and students on the south and west side to figure out their commute and travel far away out of their way just to get an education. And when you look at the student debt crisis in America, Black Americans owe on average $25,000 more than their white counterparts, according to the Education Data Initiative. Where I come from, entertainment, it's not peachy at all. The Hollywood Foreign Press recently was under fire for a lack of diversity in their ranks. The Hollywood Foreign Press is who decides the Golden Globes. In 2016, they had no black members voting on these awards we see go out to all these outstanding actors and actresses and filmmakers. In fact, you can see here, all Oscar nominations ever have been 93% white people. Think about the amazing films you see, Denzel Washington, Idris Elba, amazing actors and actresses, the late Sidney Poitier, not recognized. In music, black artists have grown to dismiss the Grammys for its failure to award black talent anything outside of hip-hop, R&B, and gospel. Think about The Weeknd. He had a song that all of us heard, and all of us probably got sick of. You know, blinding lights, I'm blinded by the lights. That song, which we all heard everywhere, did not get nominated for Song of the Year, Record of the Year. There was no Album of the Year nomination, so The Weeknd, he sat out. And honestly, I'm still triggered by that time Macklemore won a Best Rap Album Grammy over Kendrick Lamar. Y'all remember that? A Kendrick album that they teach Harvard classes on did not win a Grammy for Best Rap Album. Voting, hot button topic right now. We know that Congress is trying to take up how to solve that problem. Numerous states have drawn up laws to assert power over core election processes, restricting access to the ballot box and making the process more difficult. Some areas like Georgia went from more than 100 drop boxes in the entire state to just 23. Other states have one voting center or box per county. Think about Delaware County. There's only one place to vote in Delaware County. Ooh, those lines would be ridiculous. But that's what's happening in a lot of states right now, forcing long lines in travel. Of course, all of that a reaction to a record wave of black participation in the political process and the flipping of the state from red to blue. I had the opportunity a few years ago to interview the children of MLK, Bernice King and Martin Luther King III. They both expressed to me that for all these reasons, we have not moved far enough. The arc of justice that Dr. King talked about, it hasn't bent far enough. Not as a country, not as a people. But I always say, and my theory is that moments in pop culture and sports are often the first signals of a coming wave, that something big is about to happen, that we're going to have a moment of change, of awakening. Take note of this. In the mid-20th century, there was a subtle and small cultural shift, and it started with Jackie Robinson. The Negro League star had broken the color barrier in baseball and endured threats to his life because of it. That moment in culture prompted a man in 1955 to dream bigger. Robinson, Jackie Robinson, was the seed of Martin Luther King's dream. A king was ready to be fully realized. Flash forward to 2016. Colin Kaepernick, the 49ers quarterback, began his protest of racial discrimination and injustice by taking a knee on the sideline. He did that, he said, out of respect for military members who told him it was better to kneel than to not participate at all. Like Jackie, he endured threats and vitriol to stop what he was doing, but he did not. And he was blackballed from the sport he loved because of it. But from that moment with Colin Kaepernick, there was a cultural striking point, and we got the Black Lives Matter movement. We've seen a greater awareness and acknowledgement of racism in this country, yet, unlike 1955, no king has truly emerged. But I believe every person in this room has the capability to embody what Dr. King was for people in 1955. It all starts with us. It is our moment right now, our time to find the king inside of us. Now, this university is where I found the proverbial king in me. And I came to understand what MLK described as the long and bitter but beautiful struggle for a new world. I always found that quote fascinating. Beauty, struggle. Those words don't seemingly go together. I was a sophomore in college when Trayvon Martin was killed by George Zimmerman. That was a rough period. The feeling I had, it's really tough to describe. For the first time that I can actually remember, I was seeing a kid not much younger than I was, killed by a neighbor because he saw the color of his skin, the hoodie he was wearing, the Skittles, the can of tea, as a threat to his neighborhood. That was the first time I can remember crying uncontrollably. I was so shaken. The other time I cried was watching Finding Nemo, because something about when Nemo's swimming around looking for his dad, it grabs you. But this moment with Trayvon Martin, I cried and I talked to my mom, my rock. Asked her why something like this could possibly happen. How something like this could possibly happen. I was frustrated at times. I was absolutely full of rage, especially as I scrolled through Facebook, which was popping back then, not so much anymore. But I would scroll through Facebook, and people that I thought were friends, people that I thought loved me, were arguing why Trayvon Martin did not deserve to survive that night. They were arguing why this black teenager deserved to be killed in cold blood, why it was justified to kill this black teenager, tackling him to the ground, following him, and killing him. And that made me think, how would they talk about me if the shoe was on the other foot? Quite a reality check. Would my life be picked apart? Would they talk about that time, once upon a time, where I shoplifted a Gatorade from a gasoline station, or a time where I posted a meme that maybe I found funny but someone else didn't? Would they pick my life apart to find something wrong? Would they put a microscope on the music I listen to, the movies I watch, and try to build a character from that and justify why my life did not deserve to continue? That anger and sadness got to be too much. But me and some classmates, we all felt that. We all confided in each other. We got together and decided we had to do something about it. Some of you may remember Joe Clemens. He was a student here on campus. His stage name is right on the nose, Too Black. And Too Black was an amazing spoken word artist, is an amazing spoken word artist, but he was also a great leader. And he was very well-read, well-educated, and he was a good shoulder for me to cry on in a sense. And we worked together and organized a demonstration, a march for Trayvon Martin. Dozens of students, black, white, Latino, all coming together, wearing black hoodies in unison, walking through the university. Now, of course, this was controversial for me to do because the profession I was studying at the time says to stay on the sidelines, be objective. But there was a shift in my soul at that moment, and I was stirred to action because of what was going on. Have you ever tried to stand still on a moving train, New York, Chicago, even the Tube in London? It's nearly impossible. No matter how cool you think you are, you cannot stand still on a moving train. You got to hold on tight and get to your destination. Racism, discrimination, sexism, hatred around the world, we cannot stand still. Now, there will be many other trains I'd have to board here at Ball State. There was an SGA president who embraced the Confederate flag. There was a student drawing a noose on a giant campus touchscreen. Each time I had to make the decision to channel that anger and that sadness into action. For many of you, a similar moment may have come for you when George Floyd was killed by Derek Chauvin, a knee on his neck. Maybe it was earlier for you when that moment happened. Maybe that moment has not happened yet for you. But what's important is that when that pain and that hurt hits your heart, you got to tap into it. You got to listen to it. You got to channel it. And you cannot let it pass. Instead, you must let it fuel you and lead you to action. That's what Dr. King did throughout the South and even right here in the Midwest. When things got tough, and indeed they did, he let the pain of the moment motivate him to action. And we must do the same. It was MLK himself, the son of a preacher, a kid who did not come from privilege, who believed that we all have the capacity to be change agents. One of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King Jr., he said that everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. Choice of those words is very intentional. A heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. And you know, kids are hilarious. You know that show, Kids Say the Darndest Things? They really do. I was hosting a mentorship panel, I think the picture was up there earlier, of that for the National Association of Black Journalists. We got kids in the community together, talk about careers. We had a good time. They got some snacks, juice boxes. You know, kids love candy. You know, we was having a good time. We get to the Q&A session. First up, this little kid dressed real sharp. He had a bow tie on, had his hand right up, fired away. He asks, how do we fix racism in America? Heck if I know, kid. First of all, you're a buzzkill. No, but second, what I said to him was the larger question, it's a larger question that we just don't have time to dig into right now. But just know that we can't let racist people win. This kid was probably 6 or 7 years old. Another kid raises his hand. I'm like, oh, here we go. Okay. He chimes in. He's got this great idea. He said, you know what we should do? We should take all of the racists in the world and move them to Antarctica without clothes. Later that day, he drew me a picture of a moving truck. Now, while that is not a practical solution, it was an example of being stirred to action and letting what bothers you motivate you into action and a solution. And I'd say that was very King-like, wouldn't you? Ball State is preparing you for your future. But more than that, it's preparing you for your freedom and unlocking the power for you to free other people. Because it is a privilege to be among the degreed and the educated. An immense privilege that so many people died for the opportunity for and still to this day wish they could have. Never take that for granted. The late Toni Morrison talked about when you get these jobs out of college that you've been so excellently trained for, just remember that your real job is that you are free and you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, your job is to empower somebody else. It is a moral responsibility. And that is the spirit of Dr. King. It's the spirit he exhibited in his creation of the Southern Leadership Conference, the Freedom School in Chicago. It's a spirit he embodied in his role as a minister and mentor to men like John Lewis and Andrew Young. It's a spirit of hope that this country can live up to the ideals it claims to hold, and most importantly, it's a spirit of love, something we must embody if we're going to tackle some of the challenges ahead for this country. And you could keep this slide up for a second, that'd be great. If we truly want to embody Dr. King's spirit of love and justice, we have to fully contextualize the man and what he stood for. Now, when I was a kid, I got kind of the Disneyland version of MLK, right? Slight mentions of protests, sprinkle in that they were nonviolent. But we really only focused on the I have a dream speech. We all remember being in kindergarten or whatever elementary school grade you were and learning that speech. Then fast forward, boom, MLK is dead. Nothing filling in the blanks there. Well, I didn't learn about the March in Selma, Bloody Sunday, the Poor People's Campaign, J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI spying on his family until I got much older. And you know, the more you actually read and the more you see these silly modern-day arguments over things like critical race theory being taught in schools and support of politicians who tell white supremacists to stand back and stand by, it becomes abundantly clear some of the same people who posted MLK quotes yesterday would not stand with the man today, would not be a fan of MLK today. Because you know, before the monuments, before the federal holiday, Dr. King was extremely unpopular. In fact, there was a Gallup poll in 1966. It said that 2/3 of Americans had an unfavorable opinion of Dr. King. That was actually a 26% increase from 1963. What was going on during that time to get all this flack? Well, MLK won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1966. That was controversial. He moved his campaign from the South to the Midwest, specifically Chicago, where he said that the North is more racist than the South, and that shocked a lot of people. He endorsed a massive federal aid program for black people with a whopping $50 billion price tag, even though he made sure to focus and point out that that was still less than the annual defense budget at the time. He also argued that poor white people are in the same boat as black Americans and should form a great alliance to get jobs for all. Well, that call for a biracial coalition did not go well with the guys on Wall Street, the white elites, the businessmen. MLK, he told NBC, he said, "We're coming for our check." They really didn't like that one. King also took a stand against the Vietnam War. At that point, even the black folk were like, yo, bruh, maybe chill out a little bit. It's important to remember all of this because Dr. King has been Santa Claused over time, almost like a fairy tale. His quotes twisted to whatever agenda people want to attach to it. King was an inherently political figure, and it's important to recognize that. That's why he was a radical force for change, and what he believed was right was not always popular. But his resolve never wavered. Rocks thrown at him, his family under threat. A man punched him in the face during the Marquette Park March in Chicago, and it took great strength to not let that knock him off balance. It also took great strength not for him to knock that guy out. Ridiculous. But here's what you can take from that. When you believe something is wrong, you got to hold firm in that commitment. So if a classmate's being bullied or harassed, you got to call it out. Somebody makes an inappropriate remark or joke to someone, you got to say something about it. If you don't think pineapple belongs on pizza, you got to hold firm to that. That's because the spirit of love and justice never wavers. Part of having the spirit of King is doing more than just condemning people and condemning issues, but also being able to diagnose them. What do I mean by that? Diagnose them. It's like a doctor. How would you feel if every time you went to the doctor, it's just a roast session? Talking about your weight, your hairline, your height, all these things that are going wrong, and no solution, no fix. It's really easy to gang up on issues and not think about the people behind them. A good doctor would go further. They would diagnose, meaning identify the issue, and think of a solution. For example, it's easy to see headlines from my backyard in Chicago or Indianapolis and toss aside the neighborhoods where this violence breaks out as problems. Often you hear the term black on black crime. Often it's thrown around to silence people when they bring up other issues like racism and discrimination. But when you diagnose it, when you peel back the layers, it's really an issue of poverty and lack of investment. If you gave these areas more resources and more jobs, crime goes down. This is exactly what Dr. King was talking about during his Poor People's Campaign. And it's been shown, more resources in the community, more jobs in the community actually helps. That's how it worked in the late 19th century. According to scholar Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, back then, white progressives actually mobilized resources and flooded violent white neighborhoods with social workers and labor activists committed to creating better jobs. They also built a social welfare net, the same things Dr. King fought for, and numerous black activists fight for today. Of course, King also famously said, "Riots are the language of the unheard." So, are we actually listening? When we see the videos on the news, we see the pictures, are we digging deeper and seeing the people behind that? Or are we moving quick to judgment? It's a pivotal choice, and definitely a king-like one, to see the humanity in people first and start there. Now, one of my biggest pet peeves around MLK Day is when people say MLK sacrificed his life for this country. No. His life was taken, seized away from his wife, his children, his friends, his family, his congregation. MLK did not die for the dream. He died because of it, because he dared to have one. And that is an important distinction. Here's why. That same wickedness, darkness, and hatred that MLK still, that killed MLK, it still takes countless lives today. And you see those names right there on the screen, just some of the victims plastered across headlines, across social media, black bodies becoming hashtags and memorials to the fallen. George Floyd, Mike Brown, Tamir Rice, the little boy in Cleveland, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, and even the thousands of black bodies stricken down that do not make the headlines. And trust me, there are a lot. We must recognize and not sanitize the hatred, wickedness, and darkness that wanted MLK dead and got their wish. We have to call it out. Because what killed Martin Luther King still kills so many today. What killed Martin Luther King still holds power over our systems, our infrastructure, our criminal justice system, and, yes, our government. It even, in 2016, took over the White House. Some 5 decades after Dr. King was gunned down on a Memphis balcony, even after a black president, white supremacy has shown itself to be alive and well since 1776. It's lethal, it's deadly, and it's unapologetic in its approach. It's brash and callous, cold, calculated, and is dedicated to one thing only: crushing the minority to uphold and empower the majority. And if we truly want to embody Dr. King, we must make it our mission to root it out. I also have to emphasize this. White supremacy is not just a black American problem. Not by any means. It's an American problem. It doesn't just hurt black people. It doesn't just hurt people of color. And this is a view shared by many scholars. W.E.B. Du Bois would talk about one of the worst products of white supremacy, slavery, and he called that a singularly disastrous system for modern civilization. James Baldwin, amazing writer, famously talked about America as a house and white supremacy as a proverbial fire looking to burn it down, eating away at it. Nothing showed that more than January 6th, 2020. Those images, unforgettable. Those moments, unforgettable. All a product of what white supremacy has been allowed to do. Make no mistake, it's going to take every single one of us to stop this. Because the spirit of King is also one of unity. Think about it, the civil rights movement. White lawyers worked with protesters. In Chicago, they opened their doors and pulled up chairs to kitchen tables, providing warm meals and places to sleep. White pastors marched arm in arm and took on some of the same persecution and beatings that their black brothers and sisters were undergoing. In fact, Dr. King's dream gave way to two vastly different rainbow coalitions. You've probably heard that term before. Two different ones. Reverend Jesse Jackson Jr. in Chicago, head of Rainbow Push Coalition, had his famous Rainbow Coalition that catapulted him to seeking public office for the Democrats. Then you had Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois Black Panther Party. His Rainbow Coalition assembled from Latinos in the community, Asians in the community, all coming together for liberation for all. Both were rooted in the idea that black Americans cannot fight this fight by themselves. We cannot do this alone. Liberation, equality, justice, dismantling racist systems, that is a multi-generational, multi-ethnic, multicultural war, a crusade, and a truly American one. Former Democratic nominee for President Hillary Clinton once said, "You can't change hearts, but you can change laws." I would like to amend that because I do disagree with it. You can change hearts and laws because the best laws and the most just laws are rooted in heart, in humanity, in love. Bernice King says that social justice is love applied to systems. Dr. King knew that. That's why he fought for both hearts and laws. When you think of your heart, think of it as a piece of paper. Drop it in some coffee, it's going to turn brown. Spill some wine on it, it's going to turn red. That piece of paper changes based on its surroundings and what it puts itself around. The color of your heart changes because of the colors around you. So if you're surrounded in negativity, in darkness, in hatred, mean-spiritedness, it's going to change you, and it's not going to change you for the better. So it's super important that we're mindful of who we keep around us. Your crew is everything. There's no doubt Dr. King was the man, but that man had a tribe around him. He had loyal confidants and friends and people that lifted him up, especially when he was in Birmingham jail. Dr. King was not self-made. He was built by family. He was built by faith. He was built by friends, and he was built by love. And that made him into a lover of mankind. It's also important to be mindful of what you consume, what you give energy, because those things can color your heart too. Mean-spiritedness online, gossip at work and school, going back and forth with people on Twitter. I know, it can be tough. Somebody slides in your DMs, gets kind of nasty, you want to chirp back at them. But that stuff colors your heart after a while. That angst, that aggression, it's not good. Dr. King made it abundantly clear the solution to so many of our problems lies in how we utilize what's right here, our heart. And it lies in our humanity, our capacity for empathy, and how we view each other, and how we treat each other, and our capacity and determination to put that first above everything else. You got an amazing opportunity in front of you. You're on a first-class campus that's culturally diverse. with a university president and administration committed to those ideals. Got some great multicultural organizations here: LSU, BSA, ASA, Spectrum, the African Student Group, the Middle Eastern Student Group. I know some of my favorite memories on campus were times where I was able to have some sort of cultural exchange, you know. I remember, I'll never forget, me and some of our black classmates had a soul food fest for some of our white classmates, teaching them about some of our cultural traditions. That breaking bread, you know, that chance to really interact with each other, learn about somebody and how they came to be. It's special. Soak in those moments. Because difference is something that we should not fear. It's something we need to embrace. That is the beauty that Dr. King alludes to in the struggle. Us as people learning about each other. That is the beauty in the struggle. No, it is not easy, but wow, can it be life-changing and a wonder to see. So your mission after this is to meet somebody different from you. Talk to them, because we are all different shades of the same color. And I believe that we all, deep in our soul, have the capacity to overcome hatred in this world. Now is a time more than ever where we must lock arms with our brother and sister, our fellow human being, look them in the eyes and march forward together. Of course, that does not mean that we do not address, correct, or hold each other accountable for cultural biases or insensitivities or mistakes that may happen. But we must take action together, pass laws together, stand up for black lives together, and everyone's life together. Trans lives, gay lives, women's lives, disabled lives. We must recognize the privileges we have, because we all have them, and wield them in this fight, and use them to do what Toni Morrison talked about, freeing somebody else. It is the only way. Dr. King made it plain. It is on us, still to this very day, to meet the standard and embrace the beauty in the struggle, to embody the very essence of Dr. King, and that is love. So please, let's not fail him. Thank you.
So to my students in the room, is this on? Can you hear me? Okay, just checking. So to my students in the room, just remember that Mr. Pope was sitting in your shoes a few years ago. So you might be up here one day. So can we give Brandon another round of applause for that speech? So thank you, Mr. Pope, for sharing your insight and moving thoughts. We will now transition for questions from the audience. So if you would like to ask Mr. Pope a question, we have 2 mics. I'm holding one of them, but it'll be down there in a second at the front of the stage. We request that you ask your questions in a clear and concise manner and be respectful of time. We'll allow 1 question per person to try to get us through as many questions as possible within our designated time. When we get to the end of question and answer time, 2 of our Multicultural Center staff members will hand you a small piece of paper to let you know you are the person who has the last question. If you do not get an opportunity to ask your question of Brandon tonight, Brandon is more than willing to interact with you virtually, so through BrandonPopeTV@gmail.com or BPopeTV on all social media platforms. I also want to take a moment to thank the Department of CCIM and the Office of Student Life for co-sponsoring this event with the Multicultural Center, so can we give them a round of applause? And I also would like to make an announcement about Unity Week. The rest of the week will continue, so you can find the rest of our events on our social media page, as well as tell you about our Martin Luther King essay contest that we have due on the 24th. We sent out a comm center message about that, as well as it is on our social media platforms. We are asking students, current Ball State student, any current Ball State student, whether it's undergraduate, doctoral, or graduate student, can submit an essay, a 500 to 700 word essay, to compete for one of 3 prizes. Our first place award will be $250. Our second place is $200, and our third place is $150. And those are cash gifts based on through our generous donations from our alumni and donors in the past. So I just want to put that in your ear as well. So if you have a question, please come up to one of the mics, and I will take this mic down.
Don't be shy. What's up, Corey? Me and Corey go back.
Crack at it, Brandon, but obviously you're a journalist,
man.
you're a storyteller.
Yeah.
How do you elevate persons of color's stories in the media? A lot of times as a journalist you can get caught in what's the headline today. Sometimes you don't get to tell that in-depth story. How do you recommend journalists, storytellers that probably are going through the CCIM program right now to elevate those voices?
Great question, Corey. Corey and I go way back. We were classmates and good friends. Always had great spirited discussions and debates, and I'm sure we'll have some more in the future. I think that the best way to elevate minority voices in storytelling is to immerse yourself in those communities. I think if you think about where you live, there might be areas of where you live or where you came from that you just never visited, never thought to hang out in or kick it in. But each of those places have community staples. They have coffee shops or corner stores, barber shops, places that are community strongholds where people exchange their ideas and share their perspective. If you want to gain that perspective, I think the best thing you can do is immerse yourself in stuff like that. I think the other thing you need to do if you're a storyteller trying to intentionally elevate disadvantaged or minority voices is tapping into organizations like the National Association of Black Journalists, tapping into, AAJA, the Asian American Journalists Association, NAHJ, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, tapping into those pools of resources. Each of those organizations has resources on their websites for you to help uplift those voices, but also just talking to those journalists, getting involved in the organization yourself. You don't have to be a member of the Hispanic community to be a member of NAHJ or attend a session or go to a conference. Same for NABJ. I know my old boss, a white guy, Aaron Ramey at ABC 57 in South Bend. He's a member of NABJ. Yeah, a white guy. It's okay. And you know what that does? It keeps him immersed, keeps him abreast, and keeps him kind of hip to what we're talking about and what needs to be talked about. So it's really important to intentionally immerse yourself and find where those voices are. Thanks, Corey.
Hello, my name is Jared, and I'd just like to thank you again for coming out tonight. I learned a lot tonight, and it was very meaningful. But my question was, you mentioned back when you were studying here at Ball State that you led a march here, and I've also had similar, like the fire in my stomach, and I just don't know what the beginning steps of like leading a march like that looks like. Could you explain that?
Well, what I failed to mention in that speech is I got in trouble because I did not necessarily go by the process you have. Well, I got in trouble for a lot of reasons, but I didn't go by the process you have to go through to do a protest demonstration on campus. I just told some students, let's do it, and we did it. And then all of a sudden, the person who was in charge of student life at the time, she's calling me up. She's running to me like, Brandon, hey, I love this, but we got to get police, to escort you guys and make sure the traffic is clear and all that type of stuff. So my advice to you is, one, make sure you go through your checks and balances and make sure you're informing the university and officials about it. Most everyone at Ball State holds similar values to what you do. and likely agrees with where you're coming from, or at least supports your right to freedom of expression. So what you need to do is just inform them and make sure everything is going by the book, right? That's for your safety and also for the safety of the campus as well. But like I said, when something is really bothering you, you got to find a way to channel that. And so maybe it's a demonstration, maybe it's something you're doing online, maybe it's a campaign. There's many ways to kind of, make some good trouble in a sense that John Lewis was talking about. Now, if you're a journalist or you're studying journalism, that's also where I got in trouble. Probably shouldn't be organizing a protest. However, I always say when you're a student, you should embrace being a student, while also recognizing that when you're a professional, there's certain things you're not going to be able to do. Me, today, I cannot go out and hold a George Floyd demonstration. I can't be a part of one, because that's not my role. My role is to document that. But as a student, one, your role as a student journalist is to document, but also your role is to be a student, to learn, to embrace all the different cultural things that you're going to be exposed to here. And some of that is going to be protest action. Some of that's going to be speaking out about injustices that you see on campus. And those are moments you're going to remember for the rest of your life. So I say seize those moments when you can.
A lighthearted question.
Oh, great.
Well, we love your Two Bros in a Rose podcast. So, what did you think of this week with Critic?
She was asking about my Two Bros in a Rose podcast. So, a little known fact about me, I have a podcast I do about the Bachelor franchise. Who would have thought? It's called Two Bros and a Rose. So it's me and my guy Brandon Smith, two Brandons, two black guys, two reporters. He's a reporter in Charlotte, North Carolina at the Fox station. And we usually have a woman to keep us honest. And we just talk about the show. And usually I just kind of hate on the show. I bash it. Because it's a terrible show. But it's fun to make fun of. And that's what I do on this podcast. So you were asking, what did I think of this season with the old boy? What's his name? Clay? It felt like the Bachelor franchise, for anyone that doesn't know, has had a lot of issues with diversity, a lot of issues with how they treat black contestants, but also lack of black talent being the Bachelor or Bachelorette. For some people, that matters. Representation in entertainment. We talked about how entertainment is a part of, the issues we're facing today and how we see these cultural striking points. And so they tried to resolve some of their issues with racism and cultural insensitivity by having a black man named Matt James as their first black man bachelor. No one knew who he was, plucked out of nowhere. The season didn't go too well. It still upheld some stereotypes. The lead after that was a white woman, then a black woman. And then now Clay, who was a guy who had maybe 2 minutes of screen time the entire show, becomes the Bachelor. And it felt like, they're ready to get back to the white guys. What do I think of the season so far? I think it's actually better than I expected. That episode that came out, last week or whatever, spicy. I love drama. I love good juice. It gives me good podcast content and usually means a good episode and good audience reaction. So yeah, that's how I feel about it, but I think the show overall is a dumpster fire. So. Hey, Julie.
Hey, Brandon, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
You talk a little bit about community and being involved, and I know you do a lot of other things outside of work, but one of the things that's obvious is that you're having fun. Can you talk a little bit about why it's important, or if you believe that it is, to get involved in community and so that you can represent it, and where do you find your stories?
It's a great question, Julie. Had a chance to talk to some students on campus today about this very thing. As a journalist, You are truly a representative of your community. You're telling stories for your community. It's a noble responsibility. It's an opportunity, and it's a role and responsibility that requires due diligence. And if you're really going to do due diligence, you have to recognize who's in your community, and you have to make sure you're speaking to those voices. So how do you more accurately include those voices? How do you bring them into the fold? You get involved in different organizations. There's so many great community groups. Big Brothers, Big Sisters is one of the more popular ways I see reporters and people that aren't reporters learn more about their community and try to have a positive impact in it. A lot of times these kids are coming from disadvantaged homes, or they're coming from a one-parent home, and they just need somebody a little closer to their age, literally a big sister or big brother, to bounce things off of. But the amazing thing that happens with this is that their childhood oftentimes may have been different than yours. What they're going through right now, the issues they see, are different than what you could have possibly imagined. It's not so easy being a kid. So if you can take that 30 minutes once a month to spend that time with that kid, play some basketball, talk to them about what they're seeing in their world, it's amazing what they tell you. It really is. Groups like that, groups like My Brother's Keeper. In Chicago, we have the Rainbow Push Coalition that Jesse Jackson runs. Ways that you can get face time with your community, where you can hear them talk about the things that are concerning them. But the other thing that I always tell people to do is, hey, get on Facebook. Facebook, I know it's dying out, but these Facebook community groups, they are popping, okay? And every time they're sounding off about something that's impacting them directly. That's how you really tap into, how you raise these communities and bring them into the fold. So I love that you mentioned, Julie, having fun doing it. These things don't have to be chores, you know? Cultural exchange is a fun thing. Learning new things, I think, is great. And you're always going to be amazed at the things you pick up from somebody else different from you. Absolutely. Thank you for that question.
As someone who works in admissions, what would you, looking back, say to your 17-year-old self, who was at the time waitlisted, but eventually, obviously, admitted to the university? You're welcome. And what would you also say to a current 17-year-old looking to come to Ball State?
Wow. Whew. What would I say to my 17-year-old self? I'll start with that. I would tell my 17-year-old self to have greater trust in yourself and not focus so much on what other people are doing and other people's journeys. Keep the blinders up and understand that your lane is your lane. Some people are going to go at different rates, doing different things. And if you compare and play that comparison game, comparison really is a thief of joy. You're not going to feel good. And I know something I was doing when I was young, a lot of young people do this, is they look at what their friends are doing, what their friends have, and the things they don't. They compare, they get down about it, doesn't serve anybody well. So that's what I tell my 17-year-old self. A current 17-year-old, it's funny because I teach 17-year-olds high school journalism, sports journalism sometimes. So current 17-year-olds, I think a lot of it depends on where they're coming from, where they're at in life, but it's a time of self-discovery. It's a scary time to be 17 and to be thinking about college, to think about big decisions, trying to plot out your entire career. The big question I hated, what do you want to be when you grow up? What are you going to go to college for? We create these deadlines. Got to do this by 30. Got to do this by 35. Got to do this by 18. And that doesn't allow people to have a chance to grow as people. So to a 17-year-old, I just say, hey, run your race. If you don't know exactly what you want to do right now, it's okay. You got plenty of time to figure that out. Yeah, you're going to get pressure to, get off that undecided, but hey, keep jumping into different organizations. Ask a professor if you can pop into a class you're interested in. I'm sure many will say yes, if you're just trying to figure out what is really going to make your spirit sing. That's what I would tell a 17-year-old today. Thank you.
first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for coming out to speak to us. I really enjoyed your speech.
Thank you.
I just wrote my question down so I would make sure you get it right.
Hey, I love that.
So also, my name's Ryan, by the way.
What's up, Ryan? How are you?
Good. So as a social studies education major, knowledge of history and the lack of it is an important issue to me. I was wondering how I would go about learning more of the African American perspective on American history and how I could apply that in a classroom effectively.
Ooh, that is really good. I think the best way to go about doing that is to read black authors, read black literature. One of the greatest writers of our time right now is Ta-Nehisi Coates. He writes for The Atlantic, but he writes at a lot of other places too. And what I love about Ta-Nehisi Coates, not just his writing, but just when he talks about race, talks about these issues, he unpacks them in a way that makes you think about them in a different way. He had a controversial column where he asserted that Donald Trump was the first white president. His argument, right, there's been plenty of white guys as president. So right away you're like, huh? His argument was Donald Trump was the first president to wield and utilize white supremacy and white identity as a political rallying cry. You could agree with it or not, but hearing that perspective, reading that perspective, it was eye-opening for me. I had to think about things in a different way. So I say seek out those writers, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, poetry from Dr. Nikki Giovanni and Dr. Maya Angelou. Seek out those black scholars and even just read some books that don't have to be so serious, you know? There's a great book from Michael Eric Dyson about Jay-Z, and he uses that book and that biography in a sense of Jay-Z to talk about the issues we're going through today and some of the cultural striking points and how Jay-Z used rap to talk about his life experience and how that legacy of storytelling, black storytelling, is reflected through Jay-Z and so many other rappers after that. So I just say seek out those authors. If you need me to give you a good list, I can, shoot you some names. We can communicate on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and I'm happy to provide you with some resources. But seeking those out, and then also here on campus, I don't know if she's still here, but there was a class I took that literally was just African American history. And the professor, she's like a white Russian lady. What's her name? She was awesome, though. I know it sounds wild, right? But she was amazing. And she got me to even open my eyes more about the black experience and things that I didn't even know about the black experience and black history. So seek out courses. Dr. Beth Mesner, outstanding professor here. She has yes, I love Dr. Beth Mesner. She has a course on hate speech and discrimination that I just loved. And what I loved the most about that course was she allowed us to actually be partners in learning. Me and the president were talking about this. Dr. Beth Mesner, she had a list of hate groups in America from the Southern Poverty Law Center. And on it was the Black Panther Party. And I was always raised that the Black Panther Party was good, that they were the reason why we have free and reduced lunch and so many social welfare programs. So I said to Dr. Beth Mesner, I don't think they should be on the list. So she said, okay. Instead of you writing an essay about why they're a hate group, write me an essay on why they're not a hate group. And if I'm convinced, I'll strike it from the list. I researched, I read, I dug deep into the Illinois Black Panther Party, into Chairman Fred Hampton, the West Coast Black Panthers today, not the superhero, the organization. He's also awesome. I love Black Panther. Wakanda forever. But I was able to, from that, create a pretty convincing historical narrative. And Dr. Beth Mesner agreed and said, hey, great job. Here's an A. And hey, we learned something together. So embrace those opportunities to learn something together, have that cultural exchange. It's always a great time. Great question. And yeah, hit me up on IG or Twitter and we can exchange some different resources for you.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, what's up, man?
I'm Jalen Moore, graduating senior here, major in psychology. I know he just asked a question kind of talking about like social studies and just African American history. And I could say like over the years, it really took like my own self-education, learn a little bit more about like Black history and different things like that. And I would say just about like the media and how it portrays like certain like groups like Black Panthers, Malcolm X, and other historical figures. And it took your own like self-education from your teacher to learn a bit more. So I would say, would you say it's important, and how important would it be for like students who don't necessarily learn about Black history and like like elementary and just things like that, and also just that, just the idea of how they portray it through media. So how, and would you say that those type of classes should be like a requirement through the university?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely. Black history is American history, so Black history should be included in the curriculum. There are some states, like Illinois, like Chicago public schools, that require Black history education, require courses on it. You see this rhetoric about critical race theory being taught in elementary schools. I don't know of any elementary schools that are doing that. But teaching Black history is essential and crucial. And I think it does start, it has to start early, because like, you're probably like me. When you're in elementary school, the most Black history you're hearing is Rosa Parks was refusing to give up her seat on the bus, MLK, Malcolm X was a bad guy, and maybe you fit in a little bit about Harriet Tubman. There's so much more. There's so much more. And once you find out how much more you weren't told, you're like, where was all this information? So absolutely, it needs to be taught in every school. It needs to start early. And if you're not being taught that, or you weren't taught that, seek it out. We have this great power now in this generation where we have these tools at our disposal, our phones, where we can just Google stuff and read great pieces, great articles, academic articles, sometimes for free. You have a library that you can jump into. So I encourage you, seek that stuff out. But absolutely, Black history is American history and should be a requirement in all schools. All right. Is that all the questions? Going once. Going twice. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.
I'm not going to move this mic, but I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and listen to Brandon speak. And again, you can interact with him at BPulp TV on his social media platforms, and BrandonPulpTV@gmail.com for his email address. So I'm sure he'll be willing to chat with you and you can learn more. Thanks for coming. Have a good night.